Gloria in excelsis Deo, welcome.
Gloria in excelsis Deo. Welcome to the stream of truth. I am Dr. Tassel Faith Shamebrook.
And I'm Sean Kelly.
And today we are talking about the gifts of spring. So, depending where you are on the planet, well, it's not spring everywhere. So, the southern hemisphere. So I guess if you're in the northern hemisphere, it's spring. What's the state of spring where you are, Sean Kelly, in Canada?
It's still like the end of winter, sort of here.
Oh, okay.
Right here. It's warming up. Um, it's starting to be above zero, primarily.
Oh
Uh,
my, still really cold.
0 Celsius, not Fahrenheit, right? So I guess 32 degrees, I think, is 0 Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
So it's probably around 40 degrees or so
Okay.
most days around that. We have some warmer days. It's starting to rain a little bit now. Uh, but yeah, so our spring starts a little later probably than yours, and then you know, our summer's a bit shorter probably and stuff, but we still have that cycling. And actually the seasons have been like adjusting, right? Like, so
Is it
with the
warmer?
warming, yeah, like it's different extremes. Like it's almost like it gets colder in the winter than it used to, gets hotter in the summer than it used to.
Oh, it's getting cold. Okay, so the more extremes.
It's kind of that's what it's felt like to me. I haven't actually dug into the data, but yeah, that's what it feels like. So it's still pretty chilly. The trees are barren still.
Okay.
So it's still it's it's almost similar to fall right now, like in the way that the weather is. Like everything's the end of fall.
Okay.
Yeah, it's still chilly. It's still, it's not quite the spring that you're probably experiencing.
Yeah. So I can't stop bubbling about spring in Nashville. If anyone ever has an intention to visit Nashville, I would highly recommend coming in the springtime. To me, it's the most beautiful spring I have ever experienced. I've lived really all over the country and abroad as well. And the Nashville spring, I can't stop talking about it. It is just gorgeous, and it begins in February. This just blows my mind
You
because
barely have a winter, but yeah.
yeah, 'cause I grew up in upstate New York, actually just a few hours from where you live, and so I grew up in a climate I think exactly like what you just described. So for me, it just blows my mind that we'll start to see daffodils sometimes in early February. This upstate New York girl just cannot get over that. And then spring basically lasts here about 3 months. I would say from February through May. And it seems like every week there is something amazing that just started to bloom. We have the daffodils come up, and then the yellow forsythias, that yellow bush, and then the cherry trees blossom, and then the dogwoods blossom, and the magnolias. And then in June, the crepe myrtles blossom. And I had never even seen a crepe myrtle. This is a very southern tree. It's gorgeous, and it blooms all summer, not to mention the red buds. So I don't know, maybe it's the little girl in me, just I can't stop just exclaiming about the beauty of spring. And I keep getting this word pageant. So when I drive around town and I'm seeing spring springing up everywhere, I just keep getting this word pageant. It's just this beautiful pageantry of nature greeting me every day. It's just been such a joy, and it's been a pretty challenging few months, like in our relationship for one, and some other areas of my life. And spring has been giving me so much joy.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about it today. Um, I think the natural world in general obviously gives us so much joy and is always there for us, and Mother Earth. And so yeah, I just wanted to talk about the joy of spring today, and sort of like, no matter what is going on in your life, you always have Mother Nature. You always have Mother Nature to come back to. And I've been going on a lot of walks through the woods recently, and I keep hearing from spirit when I'm taking these walks, like, just welcome home. I just keep hearing that this is your home. This is your kingdom, Mother Earth. This is my gift to you, dear child of mine. Like, welcome home. This is yours. And it's just been really sweet to hear that each time I go out in nature. So I know you had some things in specifically you wanted to talk about around cycles and seasons. And what I wanted to just bring up, maybe to start, if it's okay, is just this beautiful metaphor of winter turning into spring, and sort of in the dead of winter, and winter is pretty short in Nashville, so it's not so intense like in other places, but just in the dead of winter, when it's cold out, maybe sometimes gray, and we don't see any signs of spring, we don't see leaves on the trees or the flowers blooming yet, it can all seem like almost like impossible. Like, when will it happen? It's like it's invisibly happening, the process. And to me, this is just such a beautiful metaphor for our lives, that sometimes we may feel we are in the dead of winter in certain aspects of our lives. I know for me, there's certain aspects of my life right now that kind of feel very stagnant and like deadened. And like, when will they ever change? When will they ever shift? Oh my goodness, I'm in winter. Where is the spring? Where is the spring? So just part of what I love about witnessing the passage of winter to spring is, oh my gosh, there weren't flowers and now there are. Oh my gosh, that tree didn't have leaves and now it does. And then every day just being outside and noticing a shift. Oh, those leaves are even more coming out and more developed, and and this has blossomed, and this too. And this is always happening in our lives as well. There's always, change is the only thing that's happening. Expansion is the only thing that's ever happening in the multiverse, whether we see it or not. So whatever aspect of your own life may feel that you are in the winter of it and it just feels stagnant and deadened, it's not. It's not. There is always some shift occurring. And a lot of it seems invisible in a lot of ways. So this has just given me a lot of renewed hope and faith and optimism in my own life, about areas of my life that feel I'm in winter, that there is always a spring. There is always a spring. And I also always come back to this truth that we are eternal souls. So, like, even if what our heart may desire may not manifest in this lifetime, you are an eternal soul. You have all the time in the world. And I do also believe that your real heartfelt desires can absolutely manifest in this lifetime. I think they feel so important because you came here to bring them through you. Yeah, so I'll just start with that.
Yeah. So Jamie said she likes the bare trees as well, the sunsets and sunrises, and with the bare trees. But spring is definitely her favorite. And then she put tons of flower emojis. So I think I have a feeling that like she might resonate with something like one of your behaviors that I find very beautiful. Especially when we're driving around or walking around, you're literally primarily you're pointing at some type of fauna and just being like, look at it, and
Wait,
look how beautiful it is.
Flora? Flora?
Did I say fauna? Fauna would be
Yeah, I
life, I
love
guess, right? Like
it. Yeah,
fauna would be animals and stuff. So flora, yeah.
yeah, Flora.
Although fauna as well, but
Yeah,
but
I do love.
flora, yeah. So the flowers and the trees, and you tend to know the names of them, or often know the names of them, and are very excited by it all. So it's
Yeah, I wonder if this is a real divine feminine thing to really be into flowers.
well, yeah. I mean, spring would be a one of the sort of symbols of rebirth or birth, right?
Yes.
Which is sort of a divine feminine task to give birth. So
Yes.
that it would make sense that the divine feminine would really harmonize with that energy um, of a springtime or anything that's newness, like that's new, bright, sort of unlimited potentials and what could happen. That type of stuff would probably really resonate with divine feminine
Yeah.
side of us.
And I've been having, I'm wondering if other people are having this experience, or you too, where I just feel the flowers and the trees are my friends, and I can feel them greeting me.
Hmm.
Um, and I feel so connected to them. Like,
Yeah,
like often way more connected than I do to humans. I just feel like they're my home, the flowers and the trees.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
they're my people. These are my people.
yeah. I think so. What sort of a phenomena that I had noticed of awakening, I guess, and then connecting into our spiritual cores and starting to see ourselves as more than just the body, to start to see that we're always extended into the physical reality, like it is all us. So a lot of people will start to have experiences where they're like, I think the tree's like talking to me, it's telling me something, and it feels pretty good. uh and
And I just have to say, it's really funny because I shared this with my son, who's, my son,
yeah.
obviously, who's 15 and quite just quote unquote normal right now. I'm like, Jackson, I really feel the trees and the flowers are talking to me. And after I said it, I thought maybe that would be something just to keep to myself right now.
I think it's really great to I talk to my son about similar things, like
Yeah.
yeah. So I say that I'll tell him that I hear angels, and that I hear other beings talking. And what I'm trying to do is to say, look, I'm a fairly normal dad, right? Like,
Right.
I know what I'm doing, I take care of you guys, we have fun, but I also hear voices of angels. And so what I'm trying to do is normalize it a little bit. Like,
Yes.
so
Good point.
there
Good
is
point.
there is a bit of a stigma associated with that type of thing in our society. And so
That's
I'm
just,
trying to catch him a little early to just
yeah.
make him realize that just because you hear things that other people aren't really hearing doesn't necessarily mean you're crazy. And
Yes.
just trying to help him see that, yes, I say something kind of wacky, but I'm quite normal, really. I'm very
Because
sane, you could say.
as we're talking about this, I realize part of what it is for me is I still have trauma and fear from my custody proceedings
Yeah.
where the other side was trying to make me out to be crazy. So, oh, I don't want to tell anyone that I hear trees talking to
Yeah, what are the
me.
repercussions of me saying these types of things? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's what I noticed, is that most of the reason what really led me onto it is that Sawyer told me he was scared of angels. Um
Oh,
so then I was like, well, we better routinely discuss angels so that you realize there's nothing to be afraid of. And it's interesting, he started to see 1111 and 111 synchronicities, and he asked me about those, and we started talking about them, and I started to tell him I feel like it's angels speaking to us is one of the ways to describe it. I think it's us speaking to us, but I don't think he's ready for that level of awareness, so I'm sort of just letting him realize there's like benevolent unseen forces that are speaking to us, and through the trees or through angels or whatever they are, just to give him that framework of like, that's what your dad believes, and you don't have to believe it, but he's interested in it a little bit, like he's curious about it, and he's not so afraid anymore. And and like, so when we go to bed and stuff, I might say like, good night, angels, and he's like, oh my god, don't. And stuff like that. But he basically, he's in that sort of normal place where a lot of people get to, where they're like, the idea of like unseen powers, or it freaks us out a bit. At a certain stage, we can get a little freaked out by that if we're more regimented in our beliefs. So I think it's great that you tell him that, because he gets to see that, like, yeah, it's weird that you say that, but like, there's nothing wrong with you, right? You don't do crazy stuff. You're being authentic.
Yeah.
So,
It's just an interesting kind of like, I don't know, tightrope to walk with your children, in a way. And I guess I'm just feeling out what feels most resonant.
yeah.
And just around what we're talking about, this connection with nature, I know the more I've awakened, just the more drawn I am to nature. And what it is it feels like nature is my vibration. Like, what I feel in nature feels like that's who I am underneath everything, which is just source energy, basically. So I think that's why I just feel so at home in nature. And what I notice is, for instance, I'm in a boat club. You've been on the boat with me, and it's this beautiful lake that has lots of different coves, and the coves that are the least occupied by other boats and other humans, like that are just like pure, I would say, source energy, are where I'm really attracted to. And it actually feels, when I go out on the boat, especially when I'm able to visit these like very pure source energy areas, I feel like a cleansing of my energy field. I think from all of the other human energy that I come into contact with, and it just, oh my gosh, it's amazing. I just love it. I just think nature is this amazing restorative energy field for us. And it's actually one of the main reasons that I decided to move out of South Florida. South Florida has a lot of amazing aspects, but it doesn't have a lot of pure nature. It's very, very developed by man. And I think as I was continuing to awaken and was holding that kind of energy, it just became harder and harder for me to be in all that man-made energy all the time. And it's one of the reasons I just adore Tennessee, because there's so much nature, so much undeveloped land.
Yeah, if it's okay, I think a lot of people that are watching will also resonate with that. I'd like to describe, if we can, the metaphysics around that. Like,
Great.
What's happening metaphysically when we're engaging with nature.
Awesome.
People might find that interesting.
I find you interesting, Sean Kelly.
Thank you. I find you interesting. You are a mystery and an enigma. There's some really interesting metaphysics happening when we are interacting with nature in a conscious sort of way, as well as an unconscious way. So this happens to us regardless of our conscious state, because there are energy fields in the physical environment that when we're, there is like proximity that does have an influence, right? But essentially nature is, so trees, plant life, animals are all what would be called second density consciousness. So it's source energy um, before positionality. There's no opinion, right? So it's a pure source energy. Uh, Depending on the particular being and how sensitive they are to the environmental energies, they will feel that really deeply, or they may not feel it as deeply. But it has this healing or calming effect, because when we're engaging with humans, we're kind of mixing our energy fields, and we both have all these positionalities or opinions about what is good and what is bad, and we sort of have tainted our auric field with distortion of sort of our shadow is a sort of the way we could see it. So it's not that anyone's done anything wrong. It's not that we're bad. It's just that we have a lot of opinions and positionalities upon what is, right? Nature doesn't have that. Nature is just being and trying to grow towards the light. So everything that nature sort of is trying to grow to the light or to its source, and it inspires a calling to source in the entity around it, which then brings about a sense of calming. So the purity of like a tree, if we hug a tree, for example, if you go hug a tree and really open yourself up as you do it, to try to consciously just open up, try to actually, we've talked about the I am presence. If you do the I am presence and hug a tree, you may find that experience to be deeply profound. And the reason is because you've for a moment at least shed your positionalities and are embracing source energy in a fullness or in a purity, and the tree is already doing that too. And so the nature is doing that. And this is why, like, even though we've modernized and sculpted our landscape, we did exactly sort of what you said. Even we make everything man-made, and then we're like, we kind of went too far, and we start to put nature back in because it feels off for us, and we don't exactly know why. But this is basically why, because we feel disconnected, and we're around all of this man-made stuff that still is consciousness. Like, for example, a house is a first density consciousness. It's still holy. It's still source energy, but you can imagine that it's been distorted by the being that's sculpted it into something, right? So so we can add our love to something and create, let's say, a sculpture that demonstrates unconditional love. And so that sculpture will actually be imbued and be more powerful than it was initially. But when we take natural elements or man-made elements, synthetic elements, and turn them into roads and buildings and things like that, we've taken from the purity of source and manipulated it into something else, so it's not quite as pure as it once was. And so we start to feel a little drained. And then also in urban environments, like you said, with people around in the coves, the people around bring all of their positionalities and their sort of I don't want this to sound judgmental, but it's kind of like energy gunk. It's like dirty energy a little bit around all of their problems that they're carrying with them, all of their anxieties, and all of that is sort of released in that area. And you pick up on it if you're within, a good 100 meters, 200 meters of people, you'll be picking up some of that. So even if you just bring your children, you may feel that depending on how your children are, you may feel the energy being less absorbable. There's more distortion, so it depends on everything. But that's sort of primarily what's happening, is like it's like knows like, source knows source.
Yeah. That is so interesting. And if it's okay, I just wanted to bring up a few examples of what we're talking about. When I lived in South Florida, uh, we had this sort of McMansion-y house, and there were a lot of palm trees that had been planted by man that were not natural. They didn't grow there naturally. And I didn't really feel connected to those trees, maybe because of that. They had man energy in them. But there was one tree in the backyard that seemed to have just grown up by itself, seemed to be indigenous, natural. And I was so drawn to that one tree. And during this time, I was basically going through a dark night of the soul, and I didn't know what was going on with me at all. I had no idea. I thought kind of that I had gone crazy. But this one tree was my friend, and I would just often just go sit by this tree, and I didn't really understand why I was so drawn to the tree. And sort of looking back, of anything I miss in South Florida, it's that tree. That tree was really there for me. And recently, I took my kids up north to visit their grandparents, and we spent a little time in New York City. And they wanted to go to the Harry Potter store, which is awesome. So that's in Midtown Manhattan, like, I don't know, in the 50s or something, around in the Broadway area. And I used to live in New York City. I lived in New York City for about 8 years, which really blows my mind when I think about it. But so this part of Manhattan is so man-made. I mean, it's probably one of the most man-made areas on the planet. Skyscrapers, pretty much no nature, obviously concrete sidewalks, cars, roads. And I was challenged by the energy.
Yeah.
And we ended up walking to Central Park, which is beautiful. And a lot of that is man-made, a lot of it is landscaped, but I felt like a relief when we got to Central Park, and I was among trees and grass and flowers. And I really, for me, I didn't really want to stay much longer in that part of Manhattan. And we ended up going back to my parents' house. And it was just a real, like, the more awakened I become, the more I really want to be amongst God's creations. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the, it's really interesting you mentioned the trees. So yeah, it's the entity, the tree is pure, but there's a taintedness to the expression that this is not what the tree wanted, maybe.
Oh,
Or
if the tree has been like planted by man.
yeah, so you can imagine, I'm sure we've all seen those new forests that get planted all in straight lines, and
Yeah.
something in us goes, I mean, it's good they're planting trees. We have an opinion that it's good that there's more trees, but it doesn't feel right. It feels a bit because it's not natural. It looks uniform. It's tainted a little by the, and it's not that the efforts of the people to plant a new forest is like somehow bad or negative. It's just that we can see and discern from just our being that is not sort of a natural creation. That is clearly a man-made thing, and we don't necessarily resonate as much with that type of expression of nature. So whenever nature is then manipulated to look or to like be put somewhere or whatever, we usually get a sense that like this, it doesn't feel quite authentic.
And
So it's not that it's bad, but
the tree itself that has been manipulated in a way by man, like placed somewhere, the tree itself then is carrying some different energy than it would if it had just grown naturally on its own.
So when I have spoken to the trees, they've told me that they just mainly want to be left alone.
Uh,
So when they're moved, they they have a feeling of not being where they're supposed to be.
uh,
Is the way that they made it feel like. They don't speak in like language to me really,
right.
but they speak more in imagery because they're speaking to the subconscious or the symbolic side of us, the intuitive side that will get images. And basically that's my understanding, is that the spirit of the tree is like, why would they move me? They make the best of it, you could say. They
Yeah.
don't like stop growing or stop loving, but what
Yeah.
there's a sadness there
Oh my
that I've
God.
felt anyway.
Yeah, I feel that too.
Yeah.
I lived during my divorce proceedings. I lived in this subdivision. I rented a house there, and there were trees there, but I think all of them. I think the land had been cleared, and then the developer, planted trees afterwards. And what you said, I still loved the trees, but I felt a sadness with the trees. Like it just didn't feel right.
if they
Something was
if they grow from a sapling, like if they grow from an actual seed, then
off.
that doesn't tend to happen as much. Like,
Okay.
because that's sort of where they were birthed. And so if they're there, there's not that indication of being taken from what they see as home. Uh,
Oh, wow. That is so
so
interesting.
so and it, it's hard to like talk about it without it sounding like I'm condemning people that plant trees or move a tree or move a plant. But I'm just trying to say that there's much more going on in the spirit area, the spirit realm of consciousness that we don't really properly understand how to interface with.
Yeah.
Like there, that the rocks even have this. Like if there's a boulder that has, let's say it has some gems in it as well, or like minerals that have been there for eons in this giant boulder, and then we break it apart, like we're interfacing with this spirit of this entity, and the entity has not so much in rocks, I guess, but if like we, for example, if we start to build on a really prominent mountain that's a named mountain, that mountain's probably starting actually to progress into second density, starting to feel a little more sentient in its consciousness. And so that mountain, if we start to build all over it, it's gonna start to get like almost depressed, sort of like the mountain, um, because it doesn't want that. It would be sort of like if somebody just started building stuff on you, right? You'd be like, "What's this about?" Um,
Wait, so does that mean like any land is not super happy about being built upon?
well, it sort of depends. If the land is built upon to serve life, not to serve vanity. So if the land is built upon and created to sustain life, then
Yeah.
nature feels great about that.
Okay.
Nature feels great about anything that sustains life. What nature doesn't tend to feel great about is something that has a darker or shadow aspect, something that is born of the ego or vanity. So
Yeah.
if we build all these ski resorts and shit all over a mountain, that's
Yeah.
the type of thing that you know, you would think the mountain wants people to visit it and whatever. The mountain doesn't care about any of that. The mountain wants to help serve by sustaining an ecosystem for life.
Yeah.
And so if there's buildings on there that are like homesteads and farm type things, these types of things are great. Things that sustain life and that are pure in just the expansion of life, not through the expansion of collection of wealth or vanity or whatever. There's a massive, I think it's in Seattle. There's a really big mountain, if I'm not mistaken,
Not
Raynor.
when
But I'm pretty sure that mountain's like owned by a company or something, right? You have to pay to go to it and stuff. So that's an example of where nature's been really tainted and the mountain feels that as well. And
This
you know,
is so interesting because um, when I'm in a like subdivision neighborhood, I can feel the energy of what created it. So I can feel like, oh, this was created with a consciousness of greed.
yep, excuse me.
And for instance, the neighborhood I live in, which is like a historic, older part of Nashville, I can feel that the energy that this neighborhood was created was from love. It was from, oh, let's build houses that people really like and have big backyards and
Your
old trees.
and your
And
area is very like unique. There's each house is pretty different. It's almost like they were all independently built to support a family of something. You know, like it
yes, it
was
was not built by a developer. It was
right.
built, I think, by individual people. And I can just feel the energy of love.
Like your house is probably 100 years old or something.
Yeah, it was built in 1938. So
Yeah,
however
so
old.
80 years or so. That's awesome.
Yeah, my house has such a vibration of love in it, like compared to this subdivision house that I rented. That house almost just didn't have energy. It was like soulless. It felt soulless.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. Anyway, it's really really interesting. And I'll also just say, for instance, I've been to Costa Rica a couple of times and there's just so much untouched, unmanipulated nature there.
Hmm.
And I think that's why people are really drawn to places like Costa Rica, because we feel that. We feel the purity of source energy there.
Yes, yeah. And something that's interesting as well. Um like people may have wondered why we decided to build square houses, things like that. So the square is a non-magical shape. A square or a box, right, is sort of symbolic of the non-infinite. It's symbolic of duality in a way. It's symbolic of categorization and limitation. And so one of the reasons that we build our houses in boxes this way is to reduce spiritual connectedness inside of the domicile, basically. The Native Americans or Aboriginals, indigenous people would often use domes or teepees or
Yes, sir.
pyramids
Mm-hmm.
because those shapes are magical in their application. So, a dome, for example, is infinite linear parallel lines, right? So that like a circle, right, is just infinite parallel lines that you couldn't count how many parallel lines form the circle. They're parallel from each other specifically, but because it's constantly bending, you can't even really measure where the line is. So it's infinite in its application. And then a teepee is like this, and the light from the earth funnels up. So the energy from the sun comes down into the earth, and then the experience light or there's three spirals of light that come up through the earth up into a teepee or dome structure and create a sort of funnel. So you could think of it as like an upside down funnel, and the light comes up and spirals around. And in a box, there's no magical property that draws that light in. So the light hits it and sort of just goes around it. Like it does penetrate a little bit, but it doesn't really it doesn't have the healing properties, the regenerative properties, the connected intuitive properties of a teepee or a dome or a pyramid. um, and then we also line our homes with a lot of different metals that don't facilitate spiritual energy very well as well. So we actually have gone to a very deep degree of trying to separate ourselves from the spiritual energy as much as possible. How that actually came about and why we did that is interesting to discuss, but I think primarily we were manipulated. We didn't really know any different. Um, and it's really interesting how it all works and how there's this subtle invisible energy field of all things, all shapes, symbols, uh, entities, trees, rocks, whatever. They all have their own field that they create, and the boxed house doesn't really invite a field to it. Boxes don't really invite field because they're inherently meant to signify limitation. So it's really interesting how we've decided to all live in boxes. Most of us, not all of us, but I just mean in the Western world. We most live in boxes.
Um, I don't know if other people listening have this experience, but I have such a hard time staying in hotels that are kind of normal. Particularly if if you can't open the window. I almost really can't stay. I really can't
Yeah.
stay. So it's interesting what you say, because these spaces to me feel so devoid of life. The energy
Yeah.
in a normal hotel room, especially if you can't open the window. And even in my house, which has really good energy, my favorite rooms in the house are rooms that have the most windows and that have doors right to the outside.
Yep.
I just always feel so like I want to be close to the outside. And I
Yeah.
think I have memories of living in teepees as a Native American and just loving being like so easy to get out of the teepee.
Yeah.
I don't like feeling like if I'm in a room that has no windows or doors to the outside, I feel so uncomfortable.
Yeah, and you might think about, so as we become more, we will start to be more in tune with our own spirituality, whether we're conscious of it or not. And then this is what inspires us to do things like go get plants. You know, why would we ever put a plant in a house,
I love this. I
right?
have this like tree here. Yeah, I love it.
Why would we ever do that? The plant obviously probably would prefer to not be in a house, but
Yeah,
but that's okay. It's okay. The plant is happy to serve us. Like the plant
yeah,
is here, is happy to serve us, and is loved. It's not a bad thing. But what I mean is it's unnatural. It's an unnatural type of expression of nature. The reason we start to do that is because we don't feel connected properly
yeah.
without being reminded of nature or feeling the presence of the divine energy that we are limiting ourselves from by being in the box. So we end up putting artwork that really resonates with us, or we will collect crystals, minerals, gems,
Amazing, huge mural right
art.
behind
Yeah,
me.
exactly. Artwork, anything that inspires us spiritually in some way or helps us feel back at home. We start to then flourish or decorate our spaces with these things or
Yeah,
mantras. We have this big one over our dining room table at my parents' house that's like bless all who eat here, and love is the most important thing, and things like that. And so we do that because we're in this non-magical sort of shape, and we want we want it to feel as homey and as vibrationally in alignment as we can make it. So it's really interesting. And even when you're here, you open all the windows. Like one day there's a window right above my toilet, and so she opened the windows all the way, and I'm just peeing, and I look down, and there's people looking up at,
sorry.
and like, so it's right in front of the toilets, and I'm standing here peeing, and like, I think it's just blocking, but they can just see that I'm just standing there.
Yeah,
And I'm probably like holding my, so, and so it's just funny because, yeah, every room you seem to go into, you're like, better open the windows.
yeah.
We need to open the windows in here. And yeah, it's interesting that we do that. And it's even like it's one of our ways of, I think, coping with being in this structure that isn't quite what we would have wanted it to be. So we turn it into as homey as we can, and that type of thing.
One of the hardest aspects of completing my PhD was that the building where where I had to get my PhD was very new, super modern, man-made, no windows that opened, a lot of AC. And the energy in that building was so hard for me. That was one of the hardest aspects of getting my PhD, was having to be in that building for all those years.
Yeah, you're extra sensitive to the environment as well, and just actually, I would say, like, and it's not a bad thing. It's a superpower, but a sensitivity to the environment and to like just the energy of what's around you. I think, for example, like that's why some of the music I listen to really kind of grates you a little bit. Like you're just like, ugh. Um, and I don't think you're judging it. It just isn't for you, right? So I think you have that like this really sensitive being that's really just wanting purity, but purity isn't so much here other than in nature and in children. We're a very confused group of individuals, or you could say, right? And we're of course not individuals, but we are a group of confused beings, you could say. And so there's not a lot of purity here that we can feel at home with, and then we end up sort of going whatever way we can to feel mostly at home.
Yeah.
I was wondering if I could talk about what I call mystical keys.
Sure.
So, we're talking about spring initially, and we've kind of just went on a ramble. We wanted to talk about something light. We had been talking about various things and conflict and all these things, and so we want to talk about something a little lighter, I think, today. And that's
I just want to kind of say, in a way, humorously, that our last stream, which was entitled Pitfalls of Communication, we kind of ended up succumbing to some pitfalls of communication. And we actually decided to just kind of remove it from the channel.
Yeah, like when we were doing that stream, I wasn't feeling very good. Right before we went on this stream, I felt like I should probably not do this, but I ignored that. And then we did the stream, and I felt like I had to defend myself a bit. And so anyways, we ended up making this stream that then I watched it, and I was like, this doesn't feel right. I'm not bringing a good vibe really here.
And I think that triggered at the end of the stream. And so it was just, the energy was not.
It wasn't great.
But I think it's so ironic that the topic of that stream was pitfalls of communication, and that's what happened.
Yeah. We wanted to show, wanted to give an example of what it's like when communication breaks down.
Yeah.
So we took that one off, and we redid this one as the new episode 91. There was some valuable teaching in that episode, but the vibe of it wasn't. It's not something I didn't like the vibe. Some of the teaching was good, but the vibe wasn't great.
The vibe today is mucho better.
And so that's why we were talking about this. But I wanted to talk about what I call mystical keys a little bit. So I'll just explain what those are. These are the signs and sort of surprises of the universe to let us know of our infinite nature, as well as to let us know what to expect as far as how the universe works, right? These sort of signs of nature are all over the place. So one really quick one is sort of the rainbow, and how the rainbow facilitates or expresses the spectrum of light that we are working with in this realm of physicality. as well as you can, and then each one of these mystical keys will get tied to something else that we would relate to our spiritual development, which
So
would
wait, the
be,
rainbow is a mystical key?
yeah. So, and that's where the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow comes from.
Yeah.
So the rainbow is within you, the chakras, right? There's 7 chakras. They're in the exact same order as the rainbow, right?
Yep.
So red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. The exact same order is seen. The and the pot of gold, that old Irish thing, was actually from the Druid teachings, Celtic ancient Druid teachings about harmonizing the inner energies, which they discerned with their third eye to be a rainbow. And at the opening of the brilliance of the rainbow is the pot of gold, which is enlightenment. So when they were trying to teach spiritual disciples about enlightenment, they would say something like the pot of gold's at the end of the rainbow. And that's also where the idea of transmuting lead to gold comes in as well, which we're transmuting our reality from a sort of darkened perception into a golden perception. Gold's traditionally sort of symbolized the divine. And that's why gold was put on so much stuff, as there was there's a certain sort of obvious connection to divinity that gold has, that gets used in various religious things and whatever else, right? So there's all of these different keys, and one of them is actually the cycling of the seasons. And so the cycling of the seasons. So what I was shown by Ka was that in each moment we go through each cycle, and then we die, and we are reborn to the next moment. So we're actually dying and rebirthing ourselves every single moment or frame of our experience. And we go through the entire cycle of the seasons in that moment. And so the seasons represent the sort of up and down wave of consciousness itself. And so we start off like in the spring. This is when the new lessons, the new blooms, new experience blooms, new ideas, new beginnings, new endeavors. All of that newness is really oriented around the lessons we're going to be learning moving forward. So I'm going to frame this maybe just around a relationship to make it relatable. A little bit in an awakening journey who's finding a relationship also, let's say. So in the spring, they find this person, and this person is like lots of promise, lots of potential, lots of connection. Look at this brand new thing that's amazing. And as that grows into the summer, this is where the light is most bright, right? This is where the main experience of that newness starts to be fully appreciated. Now that appreciation can be both really bright and happy and joyous, or because the light is all big, we see also the contrast of the shadow. But we don't usually in that summertime actually address the shadow so much. We're normally just seeing it in that space. Then we move into the autumn or the fall, where this is the harvest of what we've experienced in the first half or the first equinox. The next equinox is about integration of what was learned. So you can imagine the earth goes through the progressions or the progressions of the equinox, like whatever it's called. We go through that at the earth or the collective level, but also individually we go through these processions. In the first half, we experience a bunch of stuff, and then we have the harvest of the lessons about the stuff. And that harvest can be really beautiful or really challenging. It can be whatever it is for us. But in the autumn, we're the seeds that we planted, the crop that we started to plant in the relationship or in whatever experiences we've been having begin to blossom. And the seeds that we planted don't necessarily look like what comes out. So this is where we might start to be like, okay, I had this vision of what this relationship was, but I was a little bit disoriented by my own sort of some of my vanities, some of my ego desires, some of my attachments. Like, it was so good that I became sort of obsessed with it, maybe. That I became sort of obsessed with this person in a sort of unhealthy way, perhaps. Something like that might come up. Or we may realize that this person is just a light in our life. Things like this. And that's sort of the blooming of whatever the lessons are for all of the seeds we planted in the spring. And then in the winter, everything dies. Everything dies. And we die to ourselves a little bit. So we are forced to sort of look at a desolate landscape in a way. It's cold. The light is harder to notice. The primary way that we find light and find our faith find the light or find God, divinity, is through our faith, because the light isn't necessarily as apparent in our experience. Because what's happening is the lessons that we've harvested are now being integrated. And in that integration, it requires us to let go of some of the stuff that wasn't serving us, primarily the beliefs that we held, that we noticed don't serve us. In letting go of those beliefs, there's a sort of death of aspects of ourself and a grieving process. And so in the middle of that grieving process in the winter, there's this what we're, I think, trying to learn how to do is to move through these cycles with grace, and basically being able to use faith to stay connected to our light or our source or our divinity, regardless of where we are in these cycles. And so at the end, in the winter, when everything sort of dies, there's its own beauty to that, right? There's a beauty to every single component to the seasons. And so the main thing this is meant to show us is that in life here, there's a cycling of experience of both idleness and sort of integration and sort of hermitage, or just reviewing ourselves more inward. And you'll experience these cycles, microcosm to macrocosm. So you may go through, so you literally see that each moment is this entire cycle happening very rapidly, or what you could call rapidly if we're thinking of time. But then there's also cycles that are happening more in line with the actual seasons, that are monthly, or the year is broken into this kind of cycling. But then also there's decades of this cycling as well, where at a larger scale, we're planting lessons like 20 years ago, and then starting to finally grasp why we were doing that, what we did 20 years ago now. So this is happening constantly in a blossoming cycle. Everything is cycling that way. And when we states of our environment, an internal environment, is seen to be perfect the way it is, seen to be the natural timing of our life, of what we've chosen to experience, and therefore it must be perfect because we've chosen it. It must be for my best. And that's where that enlightened state starts to really permeate the experience. But it's through understanding that everything has its dips and wanes, and it's living and dying, that, like, you know, so for example, there are periods just in our relationship where we feel really, really connected, right? But then usually in our really, really connected state, we eventually hit something that causes a rift, and then we may disconnect a bit. And that's the cycling. It's a natural sort of cycling. And the reason we're disconnecting is basically because of some type of catalyst or something's happening that we're really not liking. And that could be seen as our lesson. So even in the relationship, we go through this blossom of back into connectedness, back into a really connected experience. And then something happens, lessons blossom, bloom, and we harvest them. And then whatever belief we had that caused all of that conflict has to die away in the winter. And then we do that, and then we come back together. So you can see even in the relationship, it's constantly doing that.
So
yeah.
Everything you said is amazing. And if it's okay, just to jump in, because I was texting you about this yesterday, that we have been following this exact cycle that you just laid out in our relationship.
Yeah.
And if I can just break it down, because it's kind of blowing my mind. We first met basically in the spring. It was in March, but close enough. And then things started to blossom between us. And we went through the summer and then the fall. And the fall is when we actually harvested. That's when we came together, like more romantically. And then we hit the winter. This is a year ago, the winter, and stuff started to come up, catalyst. And then we were in actual separation for about 3 months last winter. And then last year, April 7th, we started to be in communication again. And then to me, we followed the exact same pattern. A lot was blossoming. This summer, it was very close. Last fall, I think, again, very close. There was a lot of harvesting. We actually started our business together, very, very close. And then we hit winter and a lot of stuff came up between us. And then yesterday on April 7th, the exact date of when we came back together a year ago, it felt like we had a breakthrough, that we kind of realized what was going on between us during this winter, and that we came back close together again. And I have a sense that we're going to be closer during the next few seasons at least. But this is blowing my mind.
Mm-hmm. And the important thing, I think, to really notice is that there's an invitation to accept that these cycles are what they are. They don't, the reason they get so intense for us is because we fight them. Like, it's because we fight the cycling. Like, so for example, like if we have a disagreement or something starts to stir us into a pulling away, the invitation is to not pull away, right? Like the invitation is to be okay with the other person said something and it destroyed me. It hurt me so much that I feel I have to pull away, and the invitation's to not. And so as we don't have to actually pull away in these cyclings, we can traverse them at more of a unit and more understanding the cycling, like, and being aware of that. We could talk more about that, but Joe had a question in the chat, and this is really rare for me to have this happen like this, but Joe had a question. I started to read it, and almost before I even read it, I was hearing my guides, Ka, just giving a message for Joe. And I don't usually get messages like for other people. And so I guess just take it if it resonates, Joe, and I think it'll be useful for everyone. So he said that maybe you can shed some light on this for me. I saw different colors on the bottom of the rainbow last week for like 20 minutes. What's that mean? So different colors on the bottom of the rainbow, like just to clarify, I think what Joe's saying is that the bottom colors of the rainbow, the red, orange, the red, orange, and yellow, I guess probably were different. So I think what I'm hearing is that the energy centers in the body are being called to be investigated because they're not what they were seen to be. So what that means is our animalistic urges, like our animalistic compulsions, sort of to be sort of protective of ourselves and protective of things, need to be looked at more closely. So for Joe, what I'm hearing is that there are some areas of really deep responsibility that Joe might be feeling, and I'm not trying to tell you your experience, so just take what resonates and throw it away if it doesn't. Responsibilities for things around you, perhaps things in the physical, primarily things in the physical reality, that there's a deep kind of feeling of a responsibility to correct somehow, or to adjust, to be different, to like this isn't right, that's not right, this person isn't being the way I think they should be. There's a magnifying glass, is what they're showing me, that's showing on the lower energy centers, the root chakra, the sacral chakra, and the solar plexus chakra, and is sort of inviting to look at these urges, to determine what feels aligned or not, and also to determine, you may have been feeling more tired recently, things like that, but and that's a different thing, but the focus on some of the sort of, let's say like someone in your life is perhaps struggling with something and you're trying to help them in some way, but they're not really like hearing your advice. They're not really responding necessarily to some of the differing, like they're not responding to the advice, really. They're not really listening to what you're saying, perhaps. And I'm not sure if it's people or if it's even just yourself. It could just be yourself, that like you're trying to tell yourself to do something a little differently, but you're kind of probably aware that you're also not really listening to your own being that's saying you should probably do this differently. Something like, for me, as an example, was quitting smoking is a good one. Like, I kind of didn't want to quit, but I felt I was supposed to in a way too. So like it's something, could be something like that. But there is a deep magical ancestry, I think, in your lineage. And so I think what you might be seeing is the color of the octarine, which is the color of the adept. So this is the color of magic, I would say. I call it magic. Magic is kind of a distorted word, but the color of mystical knowing. And so I think what the invitation is that in order for us to embrace our mystic knowing, or our deeper connection to spirit, and that's not to suggest you don't already have a deep connection, but the offering is to really pay more attention to where our energy is going, like where our energy is being put into physical relationships and to different things in unhealthy ways, in ways where, like, for example, trying to help somebody that's just not listening, and then that's upsetting us. That's a good example of us sort of draining ourselves and then condemning ourselves a little bit because we don't feel like we're able to help. And we may even take it out on them, right? We may be like, well, they're not listening, blah, blah. That's not really what's happening. But so these attachments, though, they draw on our energy fields, and they keep us kind of like lower energy because we keep giving all of our energy away. And so the invitation, what I'm hearing, is essentially to start to see where these things are feeling really imbalanced. Like, primarily it's about reorient. It doesn't mean we don't help people. It just means we reorient ourselves around, like, I offer my help and then they do what they want with it. And we're okay if they ignore us entirely. We're okay. Then we're not really giving. We actually are giving away our energy in a purity in that sense, and we'll actually receive further energy from source, and it will actually bolster us when we're giving freely like that. We're giving without any focus on outcome. So we can orient ourselves that way to not drain in these moments. But then we also have to question, are we doing this at all out of a desire to change people and to change the reality? And the reason that all is relevant to the magical, mystical seeking that I'm feeling is in somehow tied to your ancestry, past lives, or lineage of some kind, family. I'm not sure. Shamanism, perhaps, something like that type of thing in the ancestry. There's these energies can't be consistently given to. Like, we can't keep giving it all away because we're just draining our being a little bit and then unable to really hit the higher states that will open up the sight. You could call it the sight, the knowing. And so, yeah, I thought that was really interesting, and we were talking about rainbows and stuff like that. So I'm not surprised that that I mentioned rainbows, and then Joe had this experience, and it's all perfect. So if that resonates, that's great. And if not, that's okay too. That's just sort of what came in, and I don't usually get like messages for people. It was kind of weird, so I was pretty excited about that. But sorry if that took us off topic, but I think it's interesting information because it does apply to pretty much anyone. These.
We were talking about this last night in the course. Energy vampiric situations. Mm-hmm. What is your life force from you?
Yeah. And what we primarily want to realize is that it's not the thing that steals your energy, right? You give it away, right? No,
you leaking your energy.
We're the vampires of ourselves, sort of, right? Yeah. That's how I like to frame it, just because I've had a lot of people, like clients and stuff, being like, oh, there's this person and they drain me, and don't let them. You know what?
You are your own energy vampire.
Yeah, exactly. We consent, right? We participate in it, and then we blame them a lot. So, and that's normal. That's normal because we just assume it must be them, because when they don't do that, I feel fine, right? It must be them, but it's not. It's just us participating and giving it away. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. Joe's guides hijack everyone. I mean, that's what it felt like. It did feel like a hijack, almost like just a very intrusive almost energy. Not in a bad way, but just, I don't think I've had that before, with just people talking and someone saying something, and then seems like either not their guides, but my guides almost relaying a sort of message, I guess. I don't do a lot of work like that. It's not normal for me. So I tend to just stay out of it. I hear it a lot, but I don't get involved. These guides were sort of like, this is really important somehow. So, yeah, so that's really cool. Thank you, Joe, for sharing that. And thank you for hearing me. And like I said, it's for everyone. There's a reason that we're saying this live, that it's all happening right now. And it's not a coincidence. If you're here listening to this, it's probably very relevant for you as well. So.
Beautiful.
Oh, and I wanted to say, he said below the purple were colors I haven't seen before. Octarine is a color on a spectrum of light that we can't see. So when you say color I haven't seen before, that's what kind of makes sense. We don't actually have a way to describe the color because it's not a color that we know. The way that I would try to describe it is almost like in my experience, it's like a blue, or a darker kind of blue, but it's iridescent in a way. So it's almost like it has all the colors in it somehow, like almost like those metallic cars that they paint that are like, they have like spectrum colors of the rainbow within them. Like depending on where you look, you'll see different colors, sort of. That's sort of how I see octarine, because I don't think there's any way to really frame it in the human eye or the human perception of color. And so it looks like that, almost like gasoline on water or something. Like it's not a normal color. And that doesn't mean that Joe saw it that way. That's just sort of how I've seen it, because we can't see it properly. So yeah, so that's really interesting. And thank you, Joe. I'm really grateful. That was a weird experience. I like weird experiences. They're very mysterious. And yeah, please do message me. Joe said he's going to message to clarify. So yeah, please do. I'd love to talk about it more. That was fun.
Well, it's 12:22 where I am. Maybe we'll stop here.
Yeah, I suppose we should. I'm just trying to think if I said everything I wanted to say about the seasons. Just to add on to that, just a little bit about cycling. So this cycling concept is not just the 4 seasons. There's also the cycling of the planetary entities around us. And then there's the cosmological cycling in the galaxy. So if you look at our galaxy, you'll notice that we move in the Milky Way galaxy, there's a black hole at the center. The black hole at the center is the logos of the Milky Way galaxy. And we rotate around the logos. And depending on where we are around the clock face of the galaxy, we actually will have varying eras or aeons or epochs, you could call them, of expression of the logos. So we're having this cycling happen so vastly to all of our experience. And eventually we get to a place where the cycling doesn't sway us so much. But while we're in the cycling, this is why astrology is very, it is very much like a weather forecast. But just like a weather forecast, someone who loves the rain will wander into the rain and be happy. Someone who loves the snow will wander into the snow and be happy. The rain or the snow or the sun is equally beautiful, equally loved, and equally joyous. And that's sort of the state that the universe invites us to arrive at eventually. Because I think we all know that our lives follow these cycles, ups and downs, right? And wouldn't it be nice if the downs were seen as ups, right? Because that's essentially what I'm trying to suggest, that we will eventually get to that place where the downs are not seen as downs. They're just different polarities of the same expression of the universe. So
yes, beautiful.
So cycles, pay attention to any type of cycles. And you can use astrology as sort of weather reports for what cycles might be approaching. And then you can see even the cycles of just your day. Like when you wake up, it's the spring, then you go to sleep, it's the winter, and you wake up again, right? So every day is a cycling of your learning that way.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for watching. And thank you, Tassel, for choosing this really cool topic.
Yeah, it was really nice to talk about something very light and not actually so much about our relationship. Yeah, it was great. Not that there's anything wrong with our relationship, but anyway, it was just nice to talk about something very light and neutral and easy peasy. Yeah, if you enjoyed this video, it really helps to give it a like or a comment. Please subscribe to our channel. And we have an amazing doctor and wizard Patreon community. We had a really wonderful gathering last night. We'd love for you to join our Patreon community. It also really helps support our work. And we really appreciate all of our Patreons so much.
I really like those gatherings because we get to do more direct, like we have a lot of, not so much questions, but sharing experience. And like we go to really random spots, random places.
Yeah, we had such a nice time after the course just chatting.
Yeah, we tend to just talk a bit. And
really fun.
Yeah.
And we have a gathering every Thursday different there's different themes, and yeah, it's just wonderful just to see everybody every Thursday. I love it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I love it.
Exactly.
All righty. We love everybody. So much love to you. And I hope you're enjoying the spring of your life.
Yes, yes. So much love. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Yay.